All right, today we're diving into a literary artifact that is so strange and, frankly, so clever, it feels like the answer to some long-lost riddle. We're talking about a play that didn't just tell a story, it remixed an entire culture. It was an act of worship that was also at the same time an incredible act of defiance. So imagine this for a second. Let's say I gave you a challenge. You have to write a play about the crucifixion of Jesus. Simple enough, right? But here's the catch. You're only allowed to use lines of dialogue written centuries before by poets who worshipped Zeus, Apollo, and Dionysus. Could you do it? Could you pull that off? And maybe the more important question is, why on earth would you even try? Well, believe it or not, back in the 4th century AD, a brilliant Christian theologian took on that exact challenge, and the result was a play called Christus Patiens, which means the suffering Christ. It's this absolute masterpiece of cultural recycling, and it tells a fascinating story about a world that was changing, and changing fast. So you gotta be asking yourself, how in the world do you build a Christian passion play using only pagan parts? I mean, it sounds like a total contradiction, right? But the recipe for how they did it is just as fascinating as the play itself. I mean, the sheer audacity of this project is just wow. This is a full-on drama about the Passion of Christ, but it's a patchwork. It's a literary remix, a mixtape, if you will, constructed almost entirely from lines lifted directly from ancient Greek tragedies. The main source was this celebrated pagan playwright named Euripides, which, of course, just brings us right back to that central burning question, why? To really get the why, we have to jump in our time machine and go back to the 4th century Roman Empire. You have to picture it like a cultural battlefield. The world was in upheaval, and Christians were facing this massive dilemma about their own heritage. See, by this point, Christianity was the new dominant faith across the empire. But, and this is a huge but, the entire world of education, of law, of art, the very language people used to think and argue, it was all built on a classical Greek and Roman foundation. And from a Christian point of view, that entire foundation was thoroughly pagan. So, as you can imagine, this sparked a massive debate among Christian intellectuals. You basically had two camps. On one side, you had people saying, reject it all. This is a tainted heritage. It's full of false gods, questionable morals. We have to throw it all out to protect our new faith. But on the other side, you had a more pragmatic group. They were saying, whoa, hold on. This stuff is a treasure trove of language, philosophy, and art. Their solution? Don't reject it. Adapt it. Take the beautiful forms of classical literature and, in a way, baptize them. Use them to express Christian truth. And this brings us to the very specific and kind of peculiar literary technique that was used to create Christus Patiens. Now, this wasn't just imitation or copy and paste. No, this was a highly sophisticated art form, and it was known as the cento. So, a cento is basically a literary work you create by stitching together verses and phrases from other authors to make something entirely new. The name itself actually comes from the Latin word for a patchwork quilt, and I absolutely love this analogy for it. It's like the multicolored, patched-together costume of a harlequin. It's a beautiful, unique garment made entirely from the scraps of something else. And get this wasn't some strange new invention. The cento had a long and really respectable history. It started way back with Homeric storytellers patching together epic poems. Later on, during the Peloponnesian War, it became a tool for satire and parody. By the time you get to Hellenistic Egypt, it was being used for serious poetry. So by the 4th century, when Christians adopted this technique, they weren't just playing a game. They were using a sophisticated, legitimate art form to express really complex theology. Okay, so we've got the context, this big cultural debate, and we have the tool they used, the cento. But what was the final spark? What was it that pushed a theologian to create this specific, really audacious play? Well, the answer lies in an act of political aggression. A book ban, of all things, is what sparked this work of genius. The trigger was an edict passed in the year 362 by the Emperor Julian. Now, Julian was the last pagan emperor of Rome, and he was on a mission. He wanted to roll back the influence of Christianity and restore the old gods. And his weapon of choice? Education. Julian's edict was a devastating blow. It straight up forbade Christians from teaching the classics. Homer, Euripides, Virgil, all of them. He argued it was hypocritical for people who rejected the pagan gods to be teaching the very literature that celebrated them. But in reality, it was a power move.
It was an attempt to cut Christians off from the cultural and intellectual heart of the empire, to basically make them second-class citizens.
And the author of Christus Patience? A man named Gregory of Nazianzus. Now, not only was he one of the most brilliant theologians and writers of his generation, he also happened to be Emperor Julian's old university rival from their student days back in Athens, and by all accounts, they pretty much hated each other on sight. So, with that bit of context, the play becomes something extraordinary. It's a sarcastic, defiant masterpiece. By writing it, Gregory was doing a bunch of things at once. He was proving, with this incredible, almost insolent brilliance, that Christians hadn't just read the classics, they had mastered them so completely they could bend them to their own will. He was using Julian's favorite pagan poet, Euripides, to tell the story of the Galilean Jesus, the very figure Julian despised. In short, it was an act of artistic rebellion. It showed that the two cultures Julian claimed were incompatible could, in fact, be fused into something powerful and totally new. But this play wasn't just a political stunt. Not at all. Beneath the clever literary game, Gregory embedded a rich and very specific Christian theology, telling a profound story using these borrowed words.
The play presents its two main heroes in really distinct ways. First, you have Jesus, who is the dogmatic hero. He's the Word of God, he's the master of history, and his sacrifice is a freely chosen act within a grand divine plan. But then you have Mary. She is the theatrical hero. She's the character whose very human emotion drives the drama. Her suffering gives the play its heart, and it positions her as this intercessor for all of humanity.
And the central message woven through all these pagan verses is a profoundly Christian one. It's that God has a plan for salvation, and it is offered freely to everyone. But, and this is the crucial point, it all hinges on our free will. God doesn't force salvation on us. We have to freely choose to accept it. The play explores this through characters like Judas and Peter, showing how our choices, not fate, are what determine our destiny. So let's bring it all home. We have a 1600-year-old play, written as a response to a book ban from a long-dead emperor. Why does this ancient remix still matter to us now? Because Christus Patience is a timeless lesson in what's called cultural synthesis. It's a powerful reminder that new, revolutionary, world-changing ideas rarely just appear out of thin air. More often than not, they find their voice by seizing the powerful tools, the languages, the art forms of the old world, and repurposing them to say something radically new. It's not about destroying the past, but about remixing it.
And that leaves us with a final question to chew on. Gregory of Nazianzus used the form of pagan tragedy to tell his most important story. So what are the established structures, the genres, the technologies of our own culture that we use to tell our most important stories? What pagan forms are we remixing right now?